Hey guys, welcome back. Going to talk a little bit more today about God's covenant with Abraham. Talk about Ishmael and Isaac and just how important it is to realize that God does his greatest work by grace through faith. And that not of ourselves, it's the gift of God. And God shows us a great example of that in this chapter.
Welcome to Everyday Truth with Kurt Skelly. We believe the Bible is true and relevant to everyone, everywhere, every day. If today's conversation is a help to you, take a moment to leave a review or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening. Now, let's join Kurt for today's episode.
Hello there, my friends. Welcome back to today's episode. We are in Genesis 17, and we are working our way through the chapter and have arrived at verse number 8, where God is in the process of covenanting. Would that be a word? Maybe reissuing or reminding Abraham of the covenant that he's already made with him. And it says in verse 8, I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So what a comfort to an aging Abraham to know that God is a keeper of his promises. We know that this is an unconditional promise that God has made to Abraham that involves both a seed promise, that there will be a great nation, innumerable in number, but also the seed specifically of the Messiah that will come through Abraham, and the entire world will be blessed because of the Messiah, Jesus. Obviously, you and I are part of that blessing. But then a land promise that God made to Abraham, to the people of God, that is yet unfulfilled. Those borders that were given, that one day Israel will inhabit an expanded border, much larger than the greatest environs that Israel ever enjoyed as a nation. And that's still future. And the purpose of this Bible study is not to get into all that, but God is giving his promise. And isn't it not interesting that he says, Abraham, here's who you are now. You are a stranger. Stranger in the sense of you're the foreigner. You're the guy from Ur of the Chaldees that just happens to be living here in a tent. So it doesn't seem to be yours yet, but this is yours. This belongs to you. I have given this to you and to your seed forever, an everlasting covenant. And I wonder what it is in your life that God has promised where it just doesn't seem like it's come to pass. It just seems like it might never happen. But remember, when God makes a promise, those promises are true. And so much of what God has promised you is yet future. Think about things like heaven and eternity and a glorified body and the things that we talk about and hope for that we will enjoy forever and forever and forever. And we'll probably even forget about these days when we're strangers and pilgrims walking through. And that's the point that the writer of Hebrews makes in Hebrews chapter 11, that Abraham lived looking for a city whose builder and ruler was God. And that's what we do. We are those strangers. We are those pilgrims. This world is not our home. And we ought to live by that same level of faith. Verse number 9, and God said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised. So this is where God institutes the covenant sign of circumcision. Now, obviously, I'm speaking to a mixed audience, and anytime you say the word circumcision, obviously it's a touchy subject, but we're mature believers, and so we understand what circumcision is. But why? Why would God want to ratify his covenant and require of his covenant people circumcision for the males. Why would he do that? I want to be sensitive here, but I want you to think about that. If the covenant involved the seed of Abraham, and seed obviously has a very biological meaning, and the fact that this is the way that biology, procreation takes place, right? When the seed and the egg get together. And so I think the point here is that, Abraham, I want to seal physically the symbol of my covenant with you in a very personal and private way in your life, where you will understand that your body and the parts of your body belong to me. And specifically, I want to remind you about that part of the body that will remind you of the way babies are made, by the way populations are propagated. And so, Abraham, I want you to remember who you are. You are the father of many nations. You are the father of faith. And so this covenant sign of circumcision really makes sense when you think about its purpose, the seed, when you think about it's personal. No one else is going to see it but you and perhaps your spouse, right? So it's purposeful, it's personal, it's permanent, it's a surgical procedure. It is something that is going to be permanent on your body. And so you think about why God chose this covenant sign, it makes a whole lot of sense, even though it's touchy to talk about. Verse number 9, "Ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. It shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you." So this private, personal covenant that you will see, I know it's there. And here's the specific criteria by which this should take place. "He that is 8 days old shall be circumcised." So boys that were 8 days old. In fact, that would be the day on which a boy would be named. The naming ceremony was the day of the circumcision. Why? Because that's the day of the ratification of the covenant, the reiteration of the covenant with every person. So remember famously in Luke chapter 1, when Zacharias had been made mute because he had disbelieved the angel Gabriel that had told him he would be the father of John the Baptist. And remember, he couldn't speak until finally on that 8th day, the day of his naming, the day of his circumcision, he said his name is John. And so that there's a good indication of how this custom began to unfold. So it says, 8 days old shall he be circumcised among you, every man-child in your generations, he that is born in the house, bought with money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed, he that is born in thy house, he that is bought with money must needs be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. So this will be a covenant sign, and this is required of everyone that's part of the household, both children and indentured servants. And the uncircumcised man child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. This is how seriously I'm taking this. Remember how Zipporah, Moses' wife, was so upset when Moses informed her that we are going to circumcise our boys. Remember when God had called Moses back to Egypt. And so why? It's important for inclusion, as a symbol of inclusion within the covenant community. And God said unto Abraham, "As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her and give thee a son also of her." So God has waited now to say, Abraham, I'm going to bless you. Abraham, I'm still keeping my covenant. Abraham, I want you to circumcise your son and your household as a symbol of this covenant. But now he says, and let me talk about Sarai, your wife. Let's call her Sarah. So God renamed Abram, Abraham, but now renaming Sarai, Sarah, a princess. Sarah shall her name be. I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her. She shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. So now God has given this additional information that not only Abraham are you going to be the father of many nations, but that fatherhood will take place through Sarai, or Sarah now, who is almost 90 years of age. And the Bible says, then Abraham fell upon his face. So think of that. He fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto me that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? He was incredulous. This was absurd to him. This was his response. Now remember, last episode, we talked about how Paul looked back at this and said Abraham was strong in faith. He staggered not at the promise of God. And yet it seems like his initial reaction to the fact that God would use Sarah is laughter and incredulity. It says in verse 18, and Abraham said unto God, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. Abraham loved Ishmael. Ishmael is now 13 years of age. Lord, just use Ishmael. Use my plan. Use my scheme. Do it my way. And God said, Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed. And thou shalt call his name Isaac, just as God had told Abraham, his name will be Ishmael. God hears. And God did hear. And God blesses. And God did bless Ishmael. But my plan, my covenant plan, is a miraculous plan that will take place through Isaac, not a plan of works, because that's what you did. You had your plan of works, Hagar, a way that you would get the job done. But no, Isaac represents the way I'm going to get the job done, because this will be a miraculous birth. And Paul is going to use this as a metaphor of works and faith when he talks about Ishmael and Isaac in Galatians chapter 4. So this is really significant. And it says, and it's interesting because what Paul was dealing with in Galatians 4 is he was dealing with the Judaizers who felt that they needed to add works to the promises of God in order to be saved. And Paul was saying, you're just like Abraham was in that sense of wanting to help God out with his plan by the deal with Ishmael. And that's not how God works. It's by salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, without works. So this whole illustration is so vital for us to understand that God works by grace through faith, and that not of ourselves. Look at verse number 20. As for Ishmael, I've heard thee. Behold, I've blessed him. I will make him fruitful. I'll multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget. I will make him a great nation. No, God, I have promises to Ishmael, but my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. So God's being very specific. I mean, this is going to happen. This is going to happen now. You're going to be circumcised, Abraham. You're going to have a baby, Abraham, and Sarah will within a year. In other words, she probably got pregnant within days. And it says in verse 22, and he left off talking with him. And God went up from Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael, his son, all that were born in his house, all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house. He circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day. But that's obedience. He obeyed that day. That's a hard process. That's a surgical procedure. But that very day. And that takes great faith on these men to allow this to happen to them. And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, Ishmael, his son, and all the men of his house, born in the house, bought with money of the stranger, were circumcised with him. So we'll stop there. That's the end of verse 27, the end of chapter 17. And we're going to pick it up next episode in chapter 18. An amazing story is the chapter 18, and we'll jump into it next episode. Until then, have a great day in the Lord. God bless you, my friends.